Now, you've spoken about the power of the setting when you're taking ayahuasca in a ceremony in the Amazon region. Now, this question has legal ramifications, but we're going to ignore those because we're just having a philosophical discussion.
Sure.
Do you believe, in fact, that a person could take ayahuasca in a responsible ceremony in his or her backyard, in his or her living room? Do you have to go down to the Amazon?
Right. I mean, that's a complicated question for me, but I like the question. I think it's an important question. So the reason that it's complicated is because I believe that that there is an entire evolution in this community that's actually happening really rapidly, as I think anything that enters into Western culture from a different part of the world is bound to do right now because of the economic system that we have, because of a huge number of different factors, in the way that anything that's interesting immediately gets stamped on a t-shirt and sold, or whatever. And so my sense is that the container is the most important element, even more so than the setting. Although the setting could be the jungle, it could also be a yoga studio. It could be a patch of land that someone has somewhere here in the United States that's tranquil and and whatever. But the container is, to me, less about, is there a shaman or not even? There's groups in South America, for example, the Santo Daime, who they facilitate groups without a centralized shamanic figure. So the collective container of the group moving through a structured ritual in the same way that a structured yoga sequence like Bikram or Ashtanga, or they move through a sequence, and everyone's doing the same thing kind of in the same way on the same wavelength. That holds the ritual space together, and there's certain safety precautions set up with guardians. And so to me, it's like the person of the shaman is hugely important. That's a practitioner to patient paradigm in ayahuasca. Then there's more like group practice with the Daime or the UDV. That's a completely valid thing. And now I know that there's even medical researchers who are starting to, lead ceremonies at various places in the United States. I say medical researchers meaning like people in the more scientific medical communities who are saying, I'm going to do this as like a therapist. And it's very underground, but there's a whole scene where all these different modalities are being experimented with. But the one thing in common is there a way, like in yoga, where you start your practice with breathing and you seal your practice with breathing? Is there something that brings it together in the beginning and end and seals it off so it's safe in a sense? And that's going on. I think it can happen anywhere in the world as long as it's safe and contained in some way.
Do you believe that ayahuasca can be composed synthetically, or do you think the plant substance is an intimate part of the ceremony?
Yeah, I don't think it can be composed synthetically. I mean, it can. Like you can take DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, which is like one of the active ingredients in the leaf component of the brew. But one of the things that you miss from that is, there's a huge, and this is something that you really, me sitting here saying it's a little weird, but literally plant spirits live in these medicines. And so one of the most amazing aspects of the experience that people have, and it's really common, is they'll talk to a tree. They'll talk to a plant. They'll talk to jaguars. They'll talk to monkeys. They'll find power animals. They have this connection to it that in my mind is really connected, especially having talked to a huge amount of people throughout this whole process and getting the feedback from people who do the pharmahuasca, which is like the synthetic. And the experience to me really seems like it takes away the fact that there are energies from the forest that live in these plants, and that you are in some ways accessing those in the visionary dimension of the experience with the plant fibers themselves, as opposed to just withdrawing the chemicals. And the other thing I think is that the DMT aspect of the experience is interesting, but to me, in the jungle they say the leaf which contains the DMT, that only opens the visionary space, right? It's the vine that helps do the purging, that's got the purgative element, and other than that, depending on the container, the songs that are being sung, which are taught by plants themselves in visions, that whole experience is something that you really have to get from the life force of the material, the plant itself. Yeah.
People have different ranges of experience taking ayahuasca. What's some of the range you've seen? I mean, your book talks about some really, truly extraordinary experiences, and I've had the privilege of hearing of some of that from other people. But are there people who take it and have a milder experience? What have you seen in terms of the range of experience?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, spanning the whole spectrum, I guess. I mean, I've known people literally who, until their 10th ceremony, they experience nothing. And then in their 10th ceremony, it's like someone dumped a bunch of, NASA-grade jet fuel on below their, third eye, and then they just blast off into the incredible visionary experience. But I mean, for the most part, and then you have people who also drink a cup, and it's on the other end of things where, like, I've had a few experiences like this, but my experiences overall have been more moderate than this. But the extreme example would be someone who drinks a cup, and for the next 7 or 8 hours, they are completely gone. Like they're out of their body. They don't have a sense really of their linear self any longer, which can be incredibly terrifying. And the experience is mostly, from what I've seen, I would say 99.9% of the time, deeply healing, transformative. But it can be the kind of thing where a person's like, okay, so I'm not ready to do that again for a while because I need like a good 2 or 3 weeks to just sit with that experience. So what I've seen more frequently than not is somewhere in between, where someone has an experience that is profound, enlightening, very healing, and very difficult on and off throughout the night, and in moving in waves. You go through little passages throughout the night of in extreme pain and discomfort in your soul, and then moving through a purgative experience where you're releasing things, like people say, years of psychotherapy in a night. I think that's sometimes really accurate. And then all of a sudden, coming out the other end, like, wow, this is beautiful. I can't believe I just released that. How did I just drink like a quarter of a cup of tea and I'm making peace with my mother in an hour? Like, how is that possible that I feel so? Then 20 minutes later, you're going back into something else. And that's been more frequent for me, where it's like you're moving in and out of very difficult and very blissful experiences throughout the night. But occasionally you get sometimes nothing. Occasionally you get like 6 hours of just intensity. So it can vary, and it really depends on where you're at and what you need to experience, I think.
I see.